Today, as I do most Thursdays in this Congress, I rise to speak about the young men from my state of North Dakota who went to Vietnam, and certainly those who died while serving in the Vietnam War. As I have said before, the families of each of these 198 fallen North Dakotans deserve to have America pause to honor and remember each of them. Before I talk about some of the North Dakotans who are missing or who died during the Vietnam War, I want to thank Arthur Tom Mandan, a Vietnam veteran from Newtown, North Dakota, who is an inspiration to our state and to our country. In 1966, Tom chose to enlist in the Army. He was stationed in Vietnam as a medic. He volunteered to extend his time in Vietnam twice and spent a total of 3 years there. The Army awarded him with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star with the V device to denote his heroism involving conflict with the armed enemy. Tom comes from a family that is also an example of service to our country. Tom and 4 of his brothers all served in Vietnam, each one after the other. And previously, their father, Victor Mandan, served our country in World War II. When Tom returned to the United States from Vietnam, he raised his family and became a teacher. He enjoyed teaching 4th graders in Mandarin and teaching the Hidatsa language to elementary and middle school students. Tom retired from teaching and now serves the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation, working full-time as tribal liaison for elders and veterans. Tom is a proud father and a proud grandfather, but he is humbled about his important contributions to his tribe, to his state, and to our country. Tom's first cousin, Myron Johnson, who was like a brother to Tom, also served in Vietnam and was killed in action there. I'd like now to talk about Myron and the 4 other young men who didn't come home from the war. Myron Chiefs High Johnson. Myron was born September 26, 1948. He was from Mandarin and was an enrolled member of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. He served in the Army's 1st Battalion, 46th Infantry, Americal Division. Myron died March 28, 1971. He was 22 years old. He was the 6th of 9 children born to Melvin and Eloise Mandan Johnson. His siblings said that Myron had a magnetic personality and was kind and sincere to everyone who met him. When people reminisce about Myron, they always talk about how much they loved him. Myron enjoyed riding bucking horses and was a top contender in the American Indian Rodeo Association. He was also a great hunter and a good shot. In Vietnam, Myron's best friend, Richard Boehm, and 32 other American soldiers were killed in action when Fire Base Marianne was attacked. Myron received many medals for his honorable and distinguished service in Vietnam. Diane Johnson is Myron's sister and my great friend. Diane said that after Myron's death, he was escorted home by his first cousin, John Morissette, who in the Indian way was Myron's brother. John served 2 tours in Vietnam and also was highly decorated. John told Diane that taking Myron home was the hardest thing he has ever done. The trail of cars accompanying Minot from the Minot Air Force, or the Minot Airport, back to his home in Mandarin was miles and miles long. In addition to his parents and siblings, Myron left behind his wife, Cheryl, and daughter, Melanie. Myron's family said that the death left a permanent scarred hole that can never be filled. They will continue to honor veterans and honor Myron for giving his life to his country. The Mandarin American Legion Post 271 is named after Myron and Myron's nephew, Nathan Goodiron, who was killed in Afghanistan in 2004. The Mandarin American Legion Post honors me consistently by allowing me to enter with their shawl at American powwows and honors me by allowing me to walk with Nathan's mother, Harriet, as we honor her as a Gold Star mother. For over 30 years, Myron's mother, despite her limited resources, honored Myron by giving away star quilts and shawls she made in Myron's name. These giveaways were held throughout the years at various flag raisings, various powwows, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day services. On Myron's mother's deathbed, she looked up and smiled and said in her native language, "Oh, my son, you are here. You've finally come to see me." Francis Dowling. Francis was from Cooperstown, and he was born July 13th, 1929. He served as a major sergeant in the Army's 1st Infantry Division. Francis was 38 years old when he died on October 17th, 1967. Francis was one of 8 children. His 2 brothers also served in the Vietnam War, George in the Air Force and Forrest in the Marines. We were unable to reach any of Francis's family members, but according to remembrances written by Jim Shelton, who served with him, Francis was a brave and a loyal soldier. Jim described Francis as tall, handsome, and professional with a strong sense of humor. Michael Myers also served with Francis, and he recalled that Francis was easily 6 feet 6 inches tall and was very muscular. Michael said he was so big people thought he was mean, but 97% of the time he had a big smile on his face. Francis died during an ambush when he was trying to shield his wounding commanding officer from further fire. Francis was buried and is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Glenn Meyer. Glenn was from Bismarck, and he was born December 31st, 1949. He served in the Navy and was trained as a fireman. Glenn died July 11th, 1970, when he was 20 years old. I have the pleasure of knowing Glenn's family. His parents, Vi and Chuck Tracy, lived just 2 doors down from the house where I raised my family in Mandan. Glenn's father, Irvin Meyer, served our country in the military and died when Glenn was very young. Vi later married Chuck Tracy, and they raised Glenn together. Vi and Chuck also gave Glenn a brother, Bob, and a sister, Sue. Bob and Sue say that Glenn was a happy-go-lucky guy. They remember him riding his Vespa scooter and enjoying time with his friends, and especially playing a lot of pinochle. Glenn's sister Sue chuckles when she thinks about growing up and Glenn not knowing how to swim. Even though Sue was younger by about 6 years, she tried to teach him how to swim in the small swimming holes on the sandbars of the Missouri River. When Glenn decided to enlist in the Navy, she joked with him that he was foolish, but he asserted to her that the Navy would make sure he knew how to swim. Glenn's brother, Bob, is grateful for meeting other men who served with Glenn in the Navy. They told Bob stories about Glenn's service, like how despite being trained in the Navy as a fireman, Glenn served on a swift boat in brown waters running machine guns. They said that they always requested Glenn for missions because he was so good with a .50 caliber machine gun. The month he was killed, Glenn was scheduled to leave Vietnam to train in the United States as a Navy SEAL. John Tagg. John was from Burlington. He was born December 2nd, 1945. John served in the Army's 1st Infantry Division. He was 22 years old when he died on June 16th, 1968. He was the oldest child in his family, and he had 3 sisters, Alice, Georgia, and Jody. Alice and Georgia said that Glenn loved to hunt and fish and did so at every opportunity. His golden retriever followed him everywhere, especially when he went hunting. After high school, John joined Job Corps, where he helped teach others about life and taking care of themselves. The Wapton Jobs Corps honored John for his outstanding work by naming a building after him. When that facility closed, Job Corps gave John's family the building sign with John's name. John's sisters appreciate that their former Des Lacs Burlington High School classmates are planning to honor John in a parade float this summer. In Vietnam, John served as a field communication electronics equipment mechanic. John was about 6 months into his tour of duty when he was severely burned. Shortly thereafter, John was flown to Japan, where he died of his injuries. He's laid to rest at Rose Hill Memorial Park in Minot. Lowell Einarsson. Lowell was from Bantry and was born March 18, 1938. He served in the Navy as a ship fitter. Lowell was 28 years old when he died on September 1st, 1966. Lowell and his sister Marilyn were children of immigrants from Iceland. Joe and Sophie, their parents, they grew up in a small farm outside of Bantry. Lowell's niece Vonda remembers hearing her mother Marilyn tell stories about how she and Lowell traveled to school in the winter by cross-country skiing. Marilyn told Vonda that Lowell was a strong young man who watched over her and took care of her, taking care of the many chores, especially after Marilyn was diagnosed with polio at age 7. Shortly after completing high school, Lowell enlisted in the Navy. He served for about 10 years until he died of a heart attack during the early part of the Vietnam War. Marilyn cherishes the 3 sets of china Lowell brought home for her mother and herself, and for himself. Sadly, Marilyn lost her belongings, including Lowell's china, when her home burned down in the 1970s. Lowell's niece Sue keeps a rubbing of Lowell's name etched on the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C., and shared that several family members have said that Lowell's nephew Mitch resembles Lowell. I continue to speak here on the floor about the lives and deaths of North Dakotans who died while serving in the war because these men remain in our hearts, and they certainly remain in the hearts of the wonderful families that we have had an opportunity to get to know during our work on this project. As in the 2012 Vietnam Proclamation on the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War states, in the reflection of the wall, we see the military family members and the veterans who carry the pain that may never fade. May they find peace in knowing their loved ones endure, not only in medals and memories, but in the hearts of all Americans who are forever grateful for their service, valor, and sacrifice. It is so important that we never forget the sacrifice of those who served in Vietnam or the sacrifice of those who serve today. And that's why I consider it such a privilege to tell the stories of those who did not make it home and listen to the stories of those who did. I want to share with you a song that was sung at the recent Vietnam Memorial exhibit in the Fargo Air Museum in May. I was really moved by a local poet and local performing artist, Sean Shipper, who was able to sing the song to honor those who serve. And I'd like to read the lyrics of his song. I'm not going to sing it, and that should really, all of you should be very excited that I'm not singing it. I couldn't do justice to the words that he wrote. And he wrote, 19 years old, 6 months from prom, out in a jungle in Vietnam. So scared, don't want to die, thinking about home, tears in my eyes. What are we fighting for? I'm so sick of war. I bet the guys on the other side want to go home like I do. Miss your mom and dad, the life I had. I pray to God to get back home again, to be with you. Search and destroy, kill or be killed, mayhem out there in the battlefield. Adrenaline flowing, another sleepless night, holding my M16, ready for a fight. Here in the trenches, fear everywhere, death and destruction, smoke in the air. Mortars, grenades, deafening sounds, shrapnel and bullets flying all around. Praying to God, calling for moms. Another buddy dies in Vietnam. Another buddy dies in Vietnam. And it goes on and on and on and on. What are we fighting for? I'm so sick of war. I bet the guys on the other side want to go home like I do. And I want to thank him. I know that he was greatly moved by and inspired to write this song by an encounter he had with a Vietnam vet. And I think all of us who have had those experiences of meeting veterans and people who serve can't help but be moved by the quality and of their continued devotion to their brothers in arms, but also the quality of their service. And so I moved to doing something for veterans, making sure that our veterans have an opportunity when they return home to basically reconnect with their families. And so while each week I come to the Senate floor to honor the North Dakotans who gave up their lives in the Vietnam War, to truly honor them and our current service members and veterans, We have to make real changes to better support them. Today, I'm proud to reintroduce a bipartisan bill that I have sponsored with Senators Moran, King, and Bozeman that would better connect our nation's new veterans with services, resources, and benefits that are available right at home in their communities. My Connect with Veterans Act aims to keep service members transitioning to civilian life after they separate from the military and begin to settle into their communities. Organizations like Association of Defense Communities have stated that the most important part of the transition from service member to civilian comes in the short period of time that a service member leaves the military. We need to make sure that it's effective and successful, and there's more we can do to accomplish that goals. Too often, these veterans don't have access to the basic information on local services, and many communities have few ways to connect with them. I have traveled across North Dakota, listened to our veterans, and I hear time and time again about the need for veterans to have more information on services and opportunities available to them at the local level. My Connect with Veterans Act would provide these veterans with better access to that information by making it easier for cities, counties, and tribes to interact directly with them. It's a simple but really common sense bill. Participation, number one, is completely voluntary. Transitioning service members will be given the option to share their contact information with communities in which they intend to live after completing military services. Interested cities, counties, and tribes will be able to request that contact information from a secure directory maintained by the Department of Veteran Affairs so they can provide the information. Integrating back into civilian life may be particularly difficult for those living in rural communities, like so many of the communities in my home state of North Dakota, as they often have fewer resources and access to less services. As a study from 2014 showed, that half of the veterans polled from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan said that they are having difficulty adjusting to civilian life. This reasonable solution would help change that by allowing local communities to connect with new veterans at the earliest possible point in the transition process. With 550 service members transitioning daily, I want to repeat that, 550 service members transitioning daily nationwide out of the military, and with nearly 250,000 servicemen and women expected to leave military service over the next 5 years, we have got to prepare. We have got to say thank you by making sure that they get the services that they've earned and that we can connect them with communities where they can continue to participate and serve their country and their communities. I know from talking to North Dakotans that this bill will especially benefit communities in my state that have unmet employment needs. If you can imagine, over 20,000 jobs that go unfilled, and we have all these trained service members that are coming out of the military who would be just excellent additions to our North Dakota community. And so whether it's in employment or healthcare or family support services, we have to do better. And so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. We have to have a plan for our service members, and I think connecting them with their community is a great plan.